Welcome back. It's the Big Blue Banter, New York Giants football podcast. I'm Dan Schneider, joined as always my co-host Nick Filato. We got a lot to talk about today. It's 2 training camp practices worth of content, a lot of big storylines that I want to get into. For starters, I will say this. Nick had the opportunity to go to a second training camp practice on Monday. We're recording this on Tuesday. I believe he was not at Tuesday's practice, and I know that because shout out Uncle Steve, who was there, and my cousin Ari, who was there with his daughter Ryan, my cousin Ryan, and she got an amazing experience, a ton of autographs. But I will say this, Nick, Ari is a little disappointed. He was really looking forward to meeting you, and he had like a special media pass for the day. I believe, don't want to reveal too much how he got that, but so he had an opportunity to meet you. So a little disappointing, but, you can't make every practice. You have work as well outside of just reporting on the Giants. So glad to see you got a second practice in, though, yesterday. Starting to really get a feel for yourself over there, Nick. So I'm excited to see how you
I'll
develop.
be there Thursday as well.
There we go. We got another one Thursday coming, so that'll be a good pod. But this one's going to have Nick's observations from Monday and our observations from what we've read on Tuesday. So the big talking points, I'm going to start us off with just bringing them up here so you guys know what's coming on the show. One, where we're going to start, the Giants offensive line. A lot to talk about there. We'll get into the specifics in a moment. 2, how the offense is looking notably different under Brian Daboll's direction. I think we're going to see a differently called offense, differently designed. We're going to get into that. 3, how the first team offense struggled mightily without Nabers. 4, the notable improvement we've seen from Jalen Hyatt's route running. And 5, Nick McLeod's steady drumbeat. 6, the Giants pass rush starting to get would-be sacks. And we might have some other stuff to add in, but those are the 6 big talking points. So, Nick, let's start with the offensive line situation. John Michael Schmitz, same shoulder that bothered him last year. We don't know the extent of it, but he's had some he's missed a few practices now. Evan Neal seems nowhere close to practicing, which is crazy, man, because remember that interview he did with Schmelke like in June? He was like, yeah, I'll be good to go for the first day of training camp. Who would have ever thought that Neal was the one who seems nowhere close to 6 training camp practice days in? And Daniel Jones is like not taking a single snap off. Like they're giving Nabers rest days, Lawrence next rest days. Jones coming off the ACL, bang, bang, bang. So finally, Greg Van Roten was signed after being brought in earlier. So that's interesting. And Jermaine Illuminor continues to practice as a starting right tackle. So a lot to get into with the O-line here, Nick. Where would you like to start?
I'd like to start with the shuffling of the offensive line. On Friday, when I was at training camp practice, Jon Runyan was asked a question at the podium. Would you be open to switching to left guard? And he didn't say no, but he's like, I don't really want to flip-flop. There was a lot of hesitancy there. Well, in today's practice, Runyan was moved over to left guard as Greg Van Roten will play right guard next to Jermaine Illuminor at right tackle. And Runyan might kick over to left guard. That's not solidified. Greg Van Roten, Brian Daboll said he could play 3 different positions. I don't think he's going to be a center, but with the position versatility between Jon Runyan and Greg Van Roten possibly being able to play center, they have done it in the past. In terms of Runyan, I think it was in like preseason. It's not something he's done a ton. And with Van Roten, it's not something he's done a ton either. I do wonder if it says that they will be the backup center options if the Giants are not confident in Morrissey or Schlottman, who have kind of been up and down so far through camp. I think the Van Roten, look, this guy's 34 years old. He has a lot of football under his belt, a lot of experience, Dan. I still am glad, though, that the New York Giants went out and signed him because he was competent and capable last year with Carmen Bracillo. So he can come in here and he might be a starting guard. And that's still the state of the New York Giants offensive line right now with Evan Neal out and with Jermaine Illuminor playing right tackle. We're all excited about this offensive line. And I still maintain what I said a little bit earlier, I think last week, that there is a level of excitement with this offensive line relative to that we've been exposed to over the last 5 years or so, Dan. But we're still talking about excitement over a 34-year-old getting placed into the offensive line room 6 days into training camp. And that doesn't usually correlate to success. I'm not saying it won't now, but usually it doesn't.
Yeah, you're not wrong about that. He is coming off a career year, which is nice. His best year of his career. Plays with the same guy, Carmen Bracillo, potentially, like you mentioned, though not guaranteed, could begin to line up on the right side. So he has basically a seamless transition after playing on the right side with Illuminor last year, back-to-back years of them playing together. Those are all positives potentially. But I will say this, Nick. Look, if you're a general manager and you use the kind of capital the Giants have used on the offensive line with Evan Neal and John Michael Schmitz, you need to get something real out of these guys by year 2 or year 3 if you want to reach a ceiling as a football team. You can beat around the bush and you could sign guys like 34-year-old Greg Van Roten. You can sign Illuminor and maybe he'll be pretty solid, but he's not going to be what you expected. And there is a big opportunity cost when you use the 7th overall pick on Evan Neal. That opportunity cost could be simply seen as a Garrett Wilson, but you can go beyond that because there are other players who were drafted after him that could really help this team. And as far as John Michael Schmitz goes, when you want to use 55 on a center, that center has to be league average or better by year 2 for me. And that's a non-negotiable. And I still think he's going to be. But the fact of the matter is, it's scary to me, like all the excitement we talked about in the offensive line improving, when those two players, your best big assets that you made as a GM on the offensive line, are both not playing early in camp. It's not great. And I want to hopefully see JMS's shoulder improve so we can get him out there. On the second front of that, the Neal front, we're starting to get into high times with Evan Neal, man. Like, things are getting real sticky fast in this situation, because Evan Neal sounds nowhere close to practicing. Now Jermaine Illuminor is racking up practices as the first team right tackle, just racking them up. They signed a guy, Greg Van Roten, who may play the position that ultimately they originally pinpointed or slotted for Jermaine Illuminor, right? Like, if you're just looking at 2 starting guards, it's Runyon locked in, and it was supposed to be Illuminor as the other. Well, maybe now that's Greg Van Roten. And if that's the case, if Illuminor is practicing at right tackle, where the hell does that leave Evan Neal in your mind?
We've been talking about this last 2 weeks, Dan. I'm unsure. I would like for him to get a chance inside, and that would relegate Greg Van Roten mostly into being an interior swing offensive lineman, which is a typical job of a 34-year-old who just signed with the team. You can't really give up on the asset that is Evan Neal, but the guy's got to get healthy first. And that's the priority. Get healthy, get on the football field, and then we can figure it out from there. But going forward right now, if he is not healthy, he can't be the first and only option at right tackle. And he's not, because the Giants went out and signed Jermaine Illuminor, and then they moved Jermaine Illuminor from left guard to right tackle. So they at least tackled that. And one more thing on John Michael Schmitz, Dan. I believe Brian Dable said this morning that he should be back soon. So it's the same shoulder, but a different injury with the shoulder is what Brian Dable intimated towards. So I'm hoping that we can get him back out there, because we want some sort of continuity heading into week 1 with this offensive line.
And I'm hoping that's the same with JMS. I feel more confident that JMS, especially the position he plays, will be able to be an asset for the Giants in year 2 for him versus, at this point, Evan Neal year 3, if I'm just going to be completely honest. And that's a sad fact of where we're at with this situation. But I will say this on the Greg Van Roten front. Let's keep in mind, as far as we celebrated and we look at all these, PFF said he was the 7th best guard in NFL last year, yada, yada. Do you think that we should also factor in where the NFL is viewing this? Because this guy hasn't been signed. Nobody rushed to sign him. We've won second, third waves. He's unsigned. So let's pump the brakes a little bit on the PFF stats and think more about what does the NFL see about the tape, because he's waited. But I am overall happy that we're adding depth, dude, and we're adding players who've started and played good football, because this is the thing we didn't do in the past. We didn't save the money to do it. We didn't have enough cap space after signing all those guys to do it last offseason. And what happened? We had a disastrous offensive line last year. The Joe Judge era, they started getting injuries. They had no depth. They signed a couple guys who retired on them because nobody wanted to practice for Joe Judge. And what happened? Another bad offensive line season that year. We're at least taking some proactive steps in my mind. They may not work, but they're proactive steps towards starting to build depth and starting to have some contingency plans. But I will say this, Nick, Evan Neal's situation, it cannot go in this direction for me, at least. It cannot go in Jermaine Illuminor's practicing at right tackle. Where does that leave Evan Neal? I guess his career's over for the Giants. They have to find a way to salvage this player some way, whether that's guard or tackle, because you can not salvage it, right? You can look at it on the other side of sunk cost fallacy, right? You should not look at assets. But when you start to stack up these first round picks that aren't making impact, Neal, Tony, DeAndre Banks, whatever, I forgot his name. Baker. I always call him Banks because it's just in my head as the good corner versus the other one. You can't win. You just can't win that way. At that point, you're relying on a hero to save you at the name of the quarterback position. Sure, if you get CJ Stroud, it all starts to look better. Sure, if you get Burrow, it all starts to look better. But you can't rely on a hero at the quarterback position, because very few teams can get that. It usually requires the first or second pick. Giants may not have that. And you need a good class, because you can get a Kenny Pickett quarterback class any year with the snap of your fingers. So you can't stack up these first round picks that don't provide value. And you can't look at it sunk cost fallacy. I need Evan Neal to work. I need them at least try one more time for Evan Neal to work. If it busts and he's healthy this year, I'm finally willing to say, you know what, for the better of the team, let's move on. But I still have a long-term opinion on this, Nick. I'm not looking at us as a Super Bowl contender right now. We really shouldn't, realistically, at this time. Things can change, but at this time. So what I'm looking at more so is the long-term health of this roster. I understand people are frustrated and they're done with Evan Neal, but I'm not ready to be done with Evan Neal yet, and I hope the Giants aren't either.
I think there could be an interesting happenstance. if Jermaine Illuminor continues to play solid, even in training camp, and we're going to have some
Yep.
joint practices soon, and we're going to have, some
yeah.
drives where he might get some preseason work as well. And if he just continues to hold it down, what do the Giants do? Do they roll the dice on Evan Neal, this guy who has been injured through much of his career, or do they just try to put him at one of those guard spots? It's going to be one of those decisions that Carmen Brasillo, Mike Kafka, Joe Shane, Brian Dable, they're all going to have to get together and bounce the ideas off each other there.
And I understand the mindset of, look, if these are your best guys, you got to play your best guys. No one should be on scholarship. But I'm just not. So I'm not arguing against that. Let me make that clear to listeners. But I am arguing against the idea that it's for sure locked in that Evan Neal is just a no good, rotten player. And he's definitely worse than Jermaine Illuminor when healthy. Because that I just don't see as a guarantee. Evan Neal had too much good tape at Bama, and he has too much. The frame's too good. Like, it's possible. Look, I understand it's possible. But how many healthy games, how many games do you think Neal's actually played fully healthy in the NFL to this point?
How many games? I
don't
have it in
fully healthy games.
Fully healthy, like 3,
right?
Yeah,
fully healthy. Because the first year he was injured early, came back and played through the injury, and Howard Cross said he could barely move out there. Then this year he got hurt again and played a few games healthy, and then got hurt again. So I mean, I don't know if maybe that's part of his profile, right? That he's just one of these guys that's injured a lot and playing injured. And in that case, fine, he's a bust, and I'm done with him. But I would love to see a stretch of 8 fully healthy games of Evan Neal to get my full good evaluation of him. And to be clear, like some fans are already, that he is definitely not better than Illuminor.
Yeah, the same here, man. I mean, you don't want to lose that asset, but at the same time, you need to get your best guys out there. And it's unclear right now if Evan Neal is one of those best guys, which
it is very unclear. All right, Nick, let's talk a little bit about the offense. You've gotten now 2 full glances of the practice, how it looks. There's a lot of talk, and obviously we can see it from the Twitter clips as well, and everybody who's done a great job taking video. Shout out to all the fans who have taken video. Great job so far by all of you. That this offense looks different under Brian Dable's design. He's taken over as likely play caller of the offense this year, but in addition to that, the reports are that, I think this is from either Stapleton or Leonard. Sorry if I missed you on the credit. The reports are that he's taken a big role in the offensive meetings that he hasn't taken previously. So he's not only calling the plays, he's designing the offense. He's designing the installs. And Justin Pugh tweeted that he felt like Brian Dable was one of the best coaches he's ever seen when it came to these types of installs in these individual offensive meetings. He said he just knows so many different positions well. And it makes sense. If you look at Dable's coaching resume, he's coached so many different positions. So he gets the game. But we've seen a lot more deep shots, a lot more verticality to the offense with under Dable's design than we've seen in the previous past. I'm curious if you think, or I'm curious maybe what your notes have been just from being at practice on how different the offense is going to look. And do you think it could fit the current players they have on the offense?
It could certainly fit the current players they have on offense. Now, in today's press conference, today is Tuesday, before practice, Brian Dable was asked about the complexities of his offense. And he said something to the degree of almost every wide receiver we have on the roster right now could play every position, meaning they understand it. Because a priority is you need to be smart to play in this offense. And how many times, ladies and gentlemen, have we heard smart, tough, and dependable? Well, Brian Dable really means it. Because if you watch some of the ways he designs these plays to get guys open, it's easy to understand how these receivers need to know every single position group, because a given play, there are 5 skill position players. One of those players, they're assigned a letter, Y, whatever it is. And you could switch that based on pre-snap and post-snap motion. That's been one of the primary things I've noticed through the 2 practices I went to is how much pre-snap and post-snap motion there is. And I'll say this too. I would say the biggest highlight in the camp, or the biggest thing that I've taken away, and this is something that shouldn't be news to a lot of people, but seeing it in person is pretty damn dope. Malik Nabers is the focal point. There are plays designed to get Malik Nabers isolated against specific defenders. And we've seen it so many times. We're talking about different types of formations where Malik Nabers will be the number 3 in empty 12 personnel. And the way the route combinations work out, Malik Nabers gets isolated off of a delayed release with somebody who is to his right on that same side, dragging to open up the horizontal part of the plane, horizontal part of the field, and then somebody outside of him clearing out the vertical to get him isolated against a slot corner, sometimes a safety. I believe I've seen Isaiah Simmons, who is a slot corner now too, isolated against Darius Slayton and isolated against Malik Nabers. And the fact that, yes, it's great when that's Malik Nabers, but now let's say Malik Nabers hyper-focused on all the time. defense adjusts. All right, let's slide Jalen Hyatt into that role. Let's slide Wan'Dale Robinson into that role, Darius Slayton, whoever it is. Now you can have them understand that role, understand what they have to do on those plays. And the defensive attention is going to be on Malik Nabers, but those plays can still be run by the New York Giants receivers because they understand every single position within the wide receiver room. So the comprehension of the wide receivers is very important. But man, my key takeaway is you are going to see a lot of design plays, creative design plays, short, intermediate, deep for Malik Nabers to get isolated in one-on-one matchups. And that's something that every Giant fan should be excited about because we haven't had a receiver like this since, like we said before, OBJ.
You're right. And it's exciting for a multitude of reasons. One, because they're doing it so early. You talked about the complexities of the offense for a wide receiver. Well, I'll tell you what, I've seen a lot of wide receivers enter complex offenses in the NFL, and it seems to me like he's picking it up fast. And if he wasn't, we would know. We would know by now if Malik Nabers is doing a poor job picking up this offense because we've certainly seen it before with our own guys, Kadarius Toney, and we've seen it with other wide receivers around the NFL of struggle. So that's a great sign, number one. Number two, I like the fact that you're talking about how this offense is designed a lot of ways for Malik Nabers to be the focal point. I've seen a lot of tape so far from Dan. I don't got tape, just clips from camp so far where he is 2, 3, 4 steps open. Yeah. That is crazy. He looks almost unguardable despite the defense understanding and knowing this offense and knowing that he is the focal point of his offense. And they're just, you talked about the release where Bellinger ran the vertical and it gave him that kind of inside release and he had a few steps there. But I mean, that throwback play where Jones tried to hit him on, he was 3, 4 steps there. Some of these verticals, we're talking 3, 4 steps. And we're not talking NFL open at that time. We're talking college open. From this type of guy. He's getting open against NFL DBs. And you could say, oh, the Giants DBs struggle. They don't have all the guys there. Doesn't matter, dude. These are NFL players, and he's getting really open very often.
And sometimes it's scheme, too. Like Malik Nabers is great, and he could burn any cornerback on this team, right? Like Deonte Banks can go punch for punch with him, but on any given play, Malik Nabers can beat him. But that play that you brought up that I put on Twitter, Malik Nabers is a line behind Daniel Bellinger. Daniel Bellinger clears out, and I don't remember what cornerback that was, but he was an outside shade. So Daniel Bellinger occupies that outside shade. And then you have Bryce Ford-Wheaton dragging underneath to remove the apex defender. So now you're just creating space. So what do you do as an offense when you create space? You attack space. And what's the best way to attack space, Dan? You use your best player to go into that space, get isolated against a cornerback, and it was Andrew Phillips who was the victim on this play. Malik Nabers hit him with a hezzy. Andrew Phillips stepped outside, assumed outside shade, gave Nabers the window to go right inside. And then Andrew Phillips pointed to push. There was no one to push to because Bryce Ford-Wheaton just cleared that guy out, and Daniel Bellinger just removed the other defender who was slightly to the outside, occupying the eyes of probably, you couldn't see it on the play, but there might have been a post safety in that area. Daniel Bellinger was also occupying those eyes. So you're talking about very unique and creative route combinations to set up your superstar wide receiver.
And to your point there, Nick, one, we've discussed in the past how strongly we feel about Brian Daboll as a play designer and play creator based on the tape we've seen, and this backs that up. And it's a big reason why we have a longer leash with him as a coach, because we know you can't find this very easy. There's a lot of bad coach hires that go down. There's not a lot of head coach. It's not like it's kind of like quarterback. When you need a new coach, you can sometimes get a Joe Judge, or you can sometimes get a Ben McAdoo.
I brought up a little bit earlier the 12 personnel play. So last year, the Giants, they would align in 12 personnel sometimes and go empty, right? And they would align the two. It was Daniel Bellinger and sometimes Darren Waller out on the outside. But they didn't have a weapon to align at the number 3. Mm-hmm. When you align 2 tight ends in 12 personnel, defense is going to match it. 12 personnel might come out with a nickel sub package, could run the football, maybe even go a little bit heavier depending on the defensive coordinator. But now you're going to take those linebackers because you're aligning the 2 tight ends outside beyond the numbers. Those 2 linebackers are going to move and vacate the middle of the field. And now you have a number 3 receiver named Malik Nabers, who you can put. And what I mean by number 3 receiver, I mean the innermost. And empty, you're going to have 3 wide receivers, more than likely to the field side, meaning the wide side, and then 2 wide receivers to the boundary side. And that number 3 is innermost to the 3rd receiver side with no linebackers in the middle of the field. We've seen plays like that in camp, Dan. So what is that going to do? Oh, shit. I'm a cornerback, and I have Malik Nabers, and if I press him, he can run around me. And if I give him space, he can have a 2-way go. And this guy's going to find a way to get open into an area of the field where you have maybe one safety who's trying to lurk down to protect against that. But if that happens and that safety lurks down to protect against that slant or that post from Malik Nabers, now you have Jalen Hyatt. And this is the number 2 on the other side, or the number 2 next to Malik Nabers, and you have a safety down in the box that could create an explosive play that way. So the sheer talent and the skill set of Malik Nabers with the creativity of Brian Dable. If the offensive line can hold up and if the quarterback can get Malik Nabers a football or any of those other weapons because the defense is defending Malik Nabers so aggressively, you're talking about creating explosive plays and you're talking about scoring points for the offense.
Exactly. Because look, when we see these charts, and this is the second point I was going to make, when we see these charts that we've seen over the past few years, 2022 season, 2023, where everybody looks and they're like, wait a second, what? The Giants wide receivers are some of the best in the separation rate in the NFL. I mean, Darius Slayton's been like insane numbers. Jalen Hyatt had good numbers last year, not as good as the other two. Wandale and Darius had unbelievable separation numbers. Part of that is because of the design of the offense, the coach and the designers who are making this creating this offense. And what that leads me to believe is if we can get to a point where we know we're designing good offense, we know we have some guys who are like 4-4 type guys after the catch. If we can get to the point where the timing is right, where the ball is being thrown with anticipation and the offensive line is held up and the ball's getting out in front and they're recognizing it fast and giving that, maximizing that space with the ball placement, with the release, with the timing, with the anticipation, it's going to be a really good offense. That's what we have to get to. If we can just get to that point where the protection holds up enough, and I even believe, I believe this, it's less so protection, because if you get to that point with your offense where you're anticipating things and you're getting the ball out fast, it only takes 2.5 seconds to get the ball out on time there. Sometimes less, to be honest. You want the ball out as fast as you can if you can anticipate it well enough and understand where the space is going to be. And at that point, the O-line and D-line is negated. It's a big reason why I used to be a big believer in pass coverage over pass rush, because I was like, if you're talking about the best quarterbacks, the real good ones, the ones who are winning Super Bowls, they're getting the ball out so fast that the pass rush isn't a lot of times negated. So there is some excitement there if Jones can get this timing down. And he's drilling it. He's working it. He has day after day. He's improving, hopefully, on the timing of this offense. And that's exciting because all he has to do, man, I really think that this offense can be so quarterback friendly, quarterback proof, if you could just feel good about where the space is going to be and where to get the ball out and just get it out on time and ahead of the receiver.
Absolutely. And you're also going to have to worry about guys dropping off the line of scrimmage to undercut Nabers. Once that gets out on tape and everything, there's going to be ways defenses can move the chessboard in their favor, but then you adjust and you adapt. And you have a mobile quarterback, and the Giants haven't been shy about allowing Daniel Jones to use his mobility in training camp. Now, he's not getting popped. He's not getting hit, but he looks good back there. And Daniel Jones has maneuvered the pocket well, stepped up, made a couple off-platform throws. Now, he's inconsistent overall, but in terms of movement, it's something that I've definitely taken away, saying he might just be full ready go. Like you can use him like you used him back in 2022.
I love a great deal as much as the next guy, but I'm not going to enter a parallel universe or go through some elaborate labyrinth just to save a few bucks. It has to be easy. No hoops, no BS. So when Mint Mobile said it was easy to get wireless for $15 a month with the purchase of a 3-month plan, I called them on it. Turns out, it really is that easy to get wireless for $15 a month. It's easy to switch to. The website has a good interface. I have a couple buddies who have recommended this to me. They speak highly of Mint Mobile. Get started. Go to mintmobile.com/BBB. That is 3 Bs. There you'll see that right now, all 3-month plans are only $15 a month, including the unlimited plan. Plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. You can use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and bring your phone number along with all your existing contacts. Find out how easy it is to switch to Mint Mobile and get 3 months of premium wireless service for $15 a month. To get this new customer offer and your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/BBB. That's mintmobile.com/BBB. 3 Bs, triple B. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/BBB. $45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details.
You ever feel sluggish or out of focus? Are you stressed? Has your digestive system caused discomfort or flatulence like a certain co-host on this podcast during a live stream? If so, you should check out AG1. When I started drinking AG1 daily, I could feel a real difference in my daily health. I had more energy, I was better off at the gym, and I could focus on my work in a much more efficient manner. That's because AG1 is a foundational nutrition supplement that supports your body's universal needs like gut optimization, stress management, and immune support. Since 2010, AG1 has led the future of foundational nutrition, continuously refining their formula to create a smarter, better way to elevate your baseline health. Not only did I replace my multivitamin with AG1, but I love that every scoop also includes prebiotics, probiotics, and digestive enzymes for gut support. I recommend AG1 to all my family and friends because AG1 has a team of doctors and scientists that formulate around the latest science and maintains high quality standards within the industry. Even my friends have started drinking AG1, and they always tell me how energetic they feel and how it's helped them out at the gym, and also it's helped them manage their stress levels. That's why we're happy to have AG1 as our partner. If you want to take ownership of your health, it starts with AG1. Try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D3, K2, and 5 free AG1 travel packs when you first subscribe. Go to drinkag1.com/banter. That's drinkag1.com/banter to check it out. Our mental and physical well-being is of the utmost importance. Whether you're a world-class athlete or a podcaster like me, we all need to take that very seriously. That's why I'm excited that Unified Healing is sponsoring this episode of the Big Blue Banter podcast. Unified Healing is a new and super innovative global network of wellness centers powered by Energy Enhancement System, or EE System. If you haven't heard of the EE System yet, you'll want to listen up. This technology promotes wellness, deep relaxation, purification, and rejuvenation. Whether you're here in New York, New Jersey, Arizona, if you will, or hundreds of other locations across the globe, access to a center is easy and affordable. Interested in experiencing the EE System technology for yourself? Go to unifiedhealing.com/banter to learn more and find a center near you. That's UNIFYD healing.com/banter. No material or testimonials on the Unified Healing website are intended to be viewed as medical advice or a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified healthcare providers with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition or treatment. And before undertaking a new healthcare regimen, include EE System.
Yeah, I mean, that's the goal. They're going to have to use them like they used them in 2022. We've talked about this a lot, Nick, but that's kind of the baseline for where we're going to be at with Daniel Jones. And I'll say this, this is a stat courtesy of Jacob Gibbs, who works for CBS Sports with me. They've used him as a rusher more under Brian Daboll, specifically in the red zone, than almost any quarterback. His red zone scramble rate before Brian Daboll was 4%, Daniel Jones. Since then, it's 14%. His red zone designed rush rate, because the scramble is not a design run, was 10% before Daboll got here and was up to 27% with Daboll. So we're talking about massive jumps as far as the usage of Daniel Jones as a runner in addition to, at the quarterback position. So I don't think that can go away. I think it's a big part of who he is and what he offers and why they re-signed him. And so I just think they have to put it to risk. And it's interesting because then it goes into the injury guarantee stuff, which you can't think about. You just have to just let it rip and hope for the best there.
And a lot of that, too, was scheme, right? It's like, oh, you want to aggressively rush your rusher up the arc? Okay, we're going to attack the B gap. We're going to take 4 or 5 yards, Daniel Jones get down. Or those RPO plays where Daniel Jones would roll out to his left. There would be somebody sliding into the flat with him and then get some poor apex defender isolated against like Daniel Bellinger in the flat or Daniel Jones's legs. So a lot of this is also attributed to just brilliant offense where Daniel Jones ended up taking it with his legs because the defender was in conflict. And he was like, I guess I'll go with Daniel Bellinger. And Jones, he can cover ground, dude. So
he can. He's a big, long strider. And so that has to continue to be a part of the offense, and it will. I don't think they'll have any hesitation. Oh, he's coming off an ACL. It's a little different. Like, I remember when Dak came off his big injury, is the ankle against the Giants. I predicted for fantasy, and I was right, that the Cowboys went, because he used to have like 6 rushing touchdowns a year, that they wouldn't use him on zone read anymore. And I was right. They don't really call zone read for him anymore. That's Dak Prescott. I think Daniel Jones is at a different point in his career than Dak Prescott is. I think at that point in his career, the Cowboys are like, we got this guy locked up and we believe in him for a long time and we need to keep him. I think for the Giants, it's everyone understands this is it for Jones. It's put up or shut up time. They can get out of his contract next year if he doesn't perform. So they got to let him perform to his best, and that includes rushing. To be completely honest with you, he can't just be a drop back guy. He hasn't proven that he can successfully be that to this point in his career. Even 2022, which is his best season of his career, Daniel Jones, a big factor in that was his rushing and his scrambling. His scramble rate brought up his EPA by massive degrees. And the Giants got a lot of first downs in key games by Jones taking the B gap, like you said, and running for the first down. So it's not like, that's it, dude, now you're a pocket passer, because that's just simply not going to work. This translates nice into the next one, which is you weren't at this practice today, but you've, I'm sure, read about it. And the first team offense struggled mightily during Tuesday's practice. And a big factor, I believe, in that was Malik Nabers basically taking a day off. I saw that he ended up getting some reps. There was a pass intended for Nabers on one of these, but the Giants' first team offense really struggled. Jones went 6 of 14 in training camp practice. That means, there's no real pressure or anything. You're just missing 8 of these 14 throws. In addition to that, 2, they said, should have been intercepted. They said also that multiple of them would have been sacks. Multiple of those 14 attempts would have been sacks. And Nabers didn't really play. And I don't think it's a big coincidence that the first team offense struggled with Nabers out. I really do believe that he is going to be not the necessary beast. I think if you're right in what you're saying, Nick, that your observation is that they've already designed this offense as him to be the focal point, they cannot really afford to not have him on the field.
He's the first punch. He's the primary punch. Now, if that punch is taken away, then you have Wan'Dale, you have Hyatt, you have a lot of other options that you can go to. And I think your assessment is correct. Without Malik Nabers, your offense is going to be significantly dialed back. But it's also the offensive line, the juggling of the offensive line. Jon Runyan, I don't know how many team periods he played at left guard, but he has discussed, like I said a little bit earlier, like he doesn't like flipping and mirroring his normal footwork to something completely different. Like that's not something that he really wants to do, but I'm sure he'll be open to doing it. It might be what ends up happening. It's still early in camp, so you can make that move now. But again, that brings in the whole Evan Neal conversation, and we already kind of went through that. But yeah, Dan, I'm not encouraged by that, but I'm also a little bit happy that the defense showed up.
Right.
Because I don't want the defense to get torn up either. And that's something that I wouldn't say has necessarily happened throughout camp. It's not like the Giants offense has been just like electric or anything. It's more just, wow, Malik Nabers is great in these one-on-ones, or in 7-on-7, we see Malik Nabers make this play. And, but like this, I wasn't there, but this period, it seems like it was rough. What were the stats? It was the Giants on 8 plays only gained a yard.
Yeah, I think Connor Rogers reported that on an 8-play stretch.
Connor Hughes.
On an 8-play stretch for the Giants' first team offense, they gained 1 yard on 8 plays. So that, and I think it was a short pass or something underneath that got rallied to.
Yeah. So one thing it's a Jalen Hyatt in the flat, I think is what I read. One thing I will say, and this is something when you go to training camp, and I know you've been to training camp, so you know this as well. There are periods and there are times that the Giants are doing something specific to see how it works out.
Right.
And a lot of it's conjecture, because it's like sometimes it could be, oh, we're going to put this guy in this spot and we're going to play. And we could see that, be like, oh, 64 is there. So then that, but then there's other times where it's something from a play calling standpoint, or it's something different that they're trying to do. And we're just unaware of it because it's not available to the media. It's not available to the public. Could that be the case?
Right.
Maybe. I'm not saying that it's not. I'm not saying that it is, but it is important to note that in training camp, it is a lot of trial and error and a lot of stuff where the coaching staff is trying to see if they can get away with certain things, or if they have certain cards in their back pocket. So that's not going to be privy to us unless it's asked to them, and then they're going to reveal their cards to you, which how likely is that?
No, it's not likely, but I do think that's an excellent point by you. I also think another point to qualify this as a plus, or, a silver lining, would be that, look, not everybody has had the, let's say, rapport that like a Joe Burrow and a Jamar Chase have had in their careers. They can step on a training camp and it's perfect. Jalen Jones hasn't had that many reps with Nabers. He hasn't had that many reps with Wan'Dale Robinson, honestly, given the 2 injury arcs of both of their careers.
Great point.
And Jalen Hyatt as well. Very few reps with him. I mean, a few games here and there and last year's training camp, but like not all the reps in the world. So they still need to get their timing down. Darius Slayton, those ones have been a little more alarming to me. There's been a few, and more than a few comeback routes to Slayton that have just been sailed over his head, and 2 deep balls that went over his head. I mean, the timing with Slayton should be down. They should understand each other. But also part of that is Daniel Jones working his way back from an injury. So he has to also get better a feel for the timing, because Daniel Jones didn't have team drills during the OTAs, the early OTAs. So part of that is a factor too. So I think we got to give all this offense the benefit of the doubt, but I also don't think it's a coincidence that when Nabers is out, it just looks completely different.
And we also had JMS out too.
Yeah.
And I believe 97 was back. So you're talking about
That
97
probably
against
the bigger fact. Yeah.
Austin Schlottman. So that's something. And again, I'm not sure if because they're just trying to slowly ramp Dexter Lawrence back because he had that illness yesterday. So maybe he didn't receive those reps, but if he did, that's a big deal.
Yeah, it is. All right, one more thing on the offense, and we're going to transition to a couple defense points. I feel like most of our focus so far throughout training camp, our coverage has been offense, and that's just how it is. I mean, look, the Giants' offense is the focal point of if this team will turn around or not. If we're going to be honest, they were one of the worst in the NFL last year. So last thing on the offense, I think going into this year, Nick, we can look back on Jalen Hyatt's rookie season and say, at least I can, and I'll see if you disagree or agree with this. The 2 biggest areas that he needed to improve were 1, his play strength, and 2, his route running and his route diversity. He did not run a lot of different kind of routes. On the first front, we saw he added a lot of muscle and a lot of actual, he's been putting on weight this offseason. That can be conjecture. I don't know if that's totally translates 1-to-1 to his play strength. We'll find that out in real games.
Just maturing does though too. He was a young kid coming out of college, so.
But I think more of that we'll find out in real games. But the second one, the route running, we can see already because you get to watch a lot of different routes, one-on-ones, but they're route running. And I think you did a good job breaking down one of them in your clip you put on Twitter. But I think from what I've seen on a multitude of different plays that I've seen of Hyatt, he's taken a jump from a route running standpoint, some of these red zone drills. What are your thoughts from what you got to see in person as far as his route running goes?
He's a lot crisper. And I think the aspect of his route running that I'm most impressed by is what he does at the top of his route. Jalen Hyatt was a vertical guy. He was somebody who could just turn the burners on and just leave you in the dust. Now you're starting to see him run these really nuanced comeback and curl routes. These routes where you release to the outside, you bend back into the inside to try and stack while also leaning on the cornerback if this is man coverage. And then right as you approach the top of the break, your destination is to the sideline, mind you. Right as you approach the top of the break, you flash the head to the inside, you lean with that inside shoulder, and then you just put that foot in the ground, and then you present your chest and your hands to your quarterback so he can hit you, and you could drag your feet out of bounds, and you could pick up the first down. And we're seeing those little nuances at the top of his route stem. It's through what he does with his body, it's through his head movements, and it's through how fluid and smooth he looks, sinking his hips and exploding out of the break. So there is a level of mentals to this. There is a level of explosiveness and athletic ability and fluidity, and it does seem to be a little bit more developed from what we saw last year. And you can attribute a lot of this to the hard work that he's put in throughout this entire offseason, and Coach Mike Groh, who has taken a ton of time out of his life when he didn't have to help Jalen Hyatt grow. And Jalen Hyatt's also out there early in practice, almost every practice, honing in on these skills and developing a rapport with Daniel Jones. So if there's anybody on this team, I mean, there are a few players like this, but I would not be shocked if the offense is functional. And there's an if there, right? But if the offense is functional, like Jalen Hyatt could benefit so much from the presence of Malik Nabers, because if he gets one-on-one matchups and he gets safeties who are more rolled down into the box to eliminate shorter throws, like Jalen Hyatt has the burners, and now he has the route running ability to create immediate separation, not just through the fact that he's fast, but also through the fact that he knows what he's doing up his route stem.
Great point. And I think that we're going to see a big, steady drumbeat continue to build throughout the rest of this training camp with Jalen Hyatt. Like you said, the production, that's going to be dependent on the O-line and the quarterback. So I'm not going to, we're going to do what we continue to do, watch the tape and see how they're doing. Because a wide receiver, man, you can have a grade on him by stats, and you could have a totally different grade on him based on the film. That's why I really like what Matt Harmon does, the reception perception. He looks at the actual, are they winning their routes? Because it's not their fault if the O-line breaks down or if the quarterback doesn't get the ball out on time or see them. You just got to keep battling through it. And I hope you're right, though, that the extra work he's putting in, specifically with Daniel Jones, will help him find production.
I think the sickest one I saw from him, I wasn't at the practice, but it was one of the earlier practice where he ran a post. I think he was the outside cornerback. It was in the end zone, and he bent the post and he got the cornerback to flip, and then he just put the foot in the ground and was just heading right back to the back route.
Yep.
And I was like, that is a route that not a lot of wide receivers can run that crisply, because you got to be able to maintain your balance through your cut and then explode to create that extra separation. And he's creating that separation again, not just through, again, the speed and the nuance, but also he has that a little bit more bulk. He's not going to bully cornerbacks, but I believe he has a little bit more bulk to at least like lean into contact and maybe create a little bit separation with the flip, and he's still a 22-year-old kid, and he's still developing, and he seems to have a good disposition about him. And I'm excited for his future.
Giants have done a lot on all. They've added so much offensive talent, man. They used a second-round pick on a receiver, an early second. They used a third-round pick. They used a sixth overall pick. They used a seventh pick on an offensive lineman. They used the fourth pick with Andrew Thomas, the 55th pick. I mean, they really added a lot of players to this offense. They should, at some point, theoretically, have a good offense, Nick. When you have that much talent on their team, it's just a matter of time, I think, hopefully, for these guys to come together. Because I do agree with you. I think Jalen Hyatt's going to outproduce his draft stock to be completely at some point. There's other factors that come into the production side of it, but definitely excited about that. I want to talk a little bit about the Giants pass rush starting to get would-be sacks in these practices, starting to really make an impact. It's a unit that we think, if the Giants do outperform expectations this year, will be one of the major factors in why they're doing so. I thought Brian Burns, Dexter Lawrence, Kayvon Thibodeau, they're all starting to come into their own. Did you see anything yesterday's practice or the other practice you're at, or even from today's from afar that stood out to you there?
Not really from yesterday's practice. Yesterday's practice was
A lot of runs, right?
It was a lot of running, and they took, Drew Lock step back and threw. Daniel Jones didn't throw that much in 11 on 11s. They did a lot of Skelly and 7-on-7 throws and things like that, which were exciting, but there's no pass rush there. So look, I think the pass rush is going to be good. I think Kayvon Thibodeau, from the one-on-ones that I heard about, because we couldn't see the one-on-ones yesterday where the media was, or really where the fans were. But I talked to somebody who was over there who had access, and he said Kayvon Thibodeau and that somebody was John Schmelk, by the way. He said Kayvon Thibodeau looked very good in the one-on-one drills. Like, he was the one who stood out. Andrew Thomas and Brian Burns, they kind of traded reps, something that you would expect. Brian Burns won some, Andrew Thomas won some, and then everything else was just kind of like, it wasn't anything super noteworthy other than that Kayvon looked very good. And I'll say this about Kayvon. Look, he's a big guy, right? Like 6'5" or whatever. I saw him standing next to me, and I'm like, you're much bigger than I thought you would be, like, from like a muscular, like, he's very, very big. Yeah. Like, and I'm around all these guys, and I'm like, yeah, they're all massive. They're all gigantic. But something about Kayvon where I was like, yeah, you're like a lot bigger than I thought you would be. I knew you would be very large, but you're very well put together human being.
Yeah, man. I mean, that was, it was the year before he got drafted, but he was viewed as one of, like, at one point they thought he'd be like kind of like a generational edge prospect. Not, that's probably a little bit over the top, but they thought he was like elite. Yeah.
I don't know if it was over the top, because before the Giants drafted him, he was viewed that way before, like, the draft cycle kind of
year before his final season at Oregon.
Yes. Yeah. And again, a lot of those college guys, if they show flashes in college like he did, the draft Twitter is just going to jump on him, and they're going to hype him up maybe even better than he is. But Kayvon was very good in college, and I think he can still be very good in the NFL.
Agreed.
Right now, I still think he's an above average edge who is on the ascend. And I think he could take I think he could take a big step in year 3 with Dex and Burns on this defense.
Yep, agreed entirely with that. So I'm very excited about the Giants pass rush. I think it has a chance to be a lot better than, I would say, consensus other fans realize. So I say I think Giants fans are attuned to it, but I don't think everybody else realizes. And I know we said that last year about the pass rush, but there were moments for the pass rush last year. 1 and 2, they didn't have Brian Burns, who they now have this year. By the way, there hasn't been much talk about it yet, but it just came to my attention because we're talking about pass rush. I've heard, and I haven't seen, I'm not at practice and I haven't seen all these clips or anything, but I've heard Azeez is having a good early start to camp. No injuries yet, and has looked pretty good. Did you get the chance to see anything from Azeez?
I haven't really seen much from Azeez.
That's okay.
I haven't focused in on him, but I've heard somebody say that as well.
Yeah. So just something to keep an eye on too, because man, if that guy can be a good situational pass rusher for the Giants as just like a fourth option after the big three, it just gives them so much more momentum to be a defense that we hope they can be. And we'll see what happens. Because I do still believe, look, everyone's talking about, oh, I'm so worried about the Giants secondary outside of Deonte Banks. And I understand those concerns to an extent, but I've seen so many teams mitigate the secondary concerns if they have a dominant enough front four. And so I'm still believe that that's a possibility for the Giants. I mean, we're talking about Dexter Lawrence, Brian Burns, Kayvon Thibodeau on one front.
Yeah. And yesterday's practice, Dex wasn't there, and Jordan Riley was the one who filled in for him. And I just thought that was noteworthy. I mean, everyone's like, oh, yeah, no shit, Jordan Riley. But remember, we did sign Jordan Phillips.
Yeah.
People made that into like a big deal. And I was like, oh, yeah, veteran guy. He might come in. And then I'm like, I don't think he's going to start, though. He's like 340 pounds, too. Like that's massive. He's not that big, but he's like close to it, right?
Big. Yeah.
He's a very big guy. And being that big, you think I would see him. I don't see him like at all in camp. Like it's more like Elijah Chapman making plays in third team, and Jordan Riley with the first team yesterday because Dexter Lawrence was out. Ryder Anderson is in there a lot. I spoke with Ryder Anderson after practice, and I asked him about hand technique. And I think Ed might have shared that video since I'm there for.
I didn't see that one.
Yeah. I'm not sure if he shared it, but Ed was interviewing him. So I went over and I spoke with him. He's gigantic too, in terms of size. Right. But seemed like a humble kid. And, he's excited for the opportunity ahead of him. And somebody like, oh, is this the best opportunity? Somebody asked like, oh, is this the best opportunity you've ever received? He's like, nah, the current opportunity is always the best opportunity. And I was like, yeah, man, like that's the mentality you need. So go out there and ball Ryder Anderson.
Yeah, those are the types of questions I can do without this is the best. What are we learning from that? No offense. I know
I didn't ask it, but still.
No, I know you didn't ask it.
It is.
I know you didn't ask it. And I'm not blaming the person for asking it. I'm just more interested in what you said the first time, the hand technique type questions and like stuff that could actually translate. But look, it is an opportunity for him, and I think that's obvious, and we're going to see how he does with it. These are players, Ryder Anderson, Jordan Riley, the players you're naming, that are going to play a role. You need to have a rotation on the defensive line. It's not one of those positions like DB or wide receiver where you see some guys have 100% of the snaps like McKinney had last year or whatever. Like it's a rotation position. So I'm very interested to see how those guys do as well. Another guy, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, one more name I wanted to bring up just because he had this clear sack. It might have been third team or it might have been second team yesterday, and it's Deontay Johnson because we brought him up a couple weeks ago.
So far for him.
Yeah, because Micah McFadden, he's another one who's having that slow ramp up into playing time. And you're starting to see Isaiah Simmons. You're starting to see Carter Coughlin earning first-team snaps in the nickel, dime, sub package, along with Bobby Okereke. Sometimes those guys aren't even out there. But I've seen Deontay Johnson out there. He's a well-put-together dude. He's big. He's making plays. And it's hard to make plays at linebacker when you're not actually tackling. It's just kind of like execute your run fit well. But he did have a clear shot in on whoever the quarterback was, and it would have been an easy sack. And it just kind of gets me thinking, like, maybe he has like a path to this roster and a path to, I don't want to say playing time, but should we be concerned about Micah McFadden with the defensive switch and him not being fully ramped up early on here in training camp?
I wouldn't say concerned for me, but I would say we can feel like this is more open maybe as a position battle than we originally thought. Because I also think there's like Micah McFadden had a really, really great stretch last year. And I was harsh on him in the beginning. And I remember Carl Banks saying like, look, I'm telling you, give this guy some time and it's going to start to click for him. And then it did click for him, but it didn't last the entire season. He had a 5-6 game stretch where it clicked and then fell off a little bit at the end of the season. Ended up with a really high missed tackle rate. Micah McFadden is something we've talked about, him converting that. And I don't really think there were some flashes. I still don't think he improved to becoming a great asset for you in your zone defenses in pass coverage. I think he'll be limited his whole career, given his length at the position, for getting his hand in passing lanes and just being that kind of player who can help you in that regard in zone defense. Man defense, I've never felt like he was going to be a big option in pass coverage and man defense. So I think they're open to exploring different options, a new defense. So I would say that the Giants fans and us, we should be open to that being a battle when we didn't maybe necessarily expect it to be.
And the only reason I bring it up is because I had a little bit of it in my notes that Deontay Johnson also received some first team reps at some point in yesterday's practice, along with Carter Coughlin, like I mentioned earlier.
Right. And those are two guys who, Coughlin especially, is somebody who, has made his way as a special teamer, but new defense, you never know, could find his way. All right. Another player I want to discuss a little bit, steady drumbeat player, probably the steadiest of all drumbeats so far, not obviously including Malik Nabers, who doesn't need a drumbeat. He's just there already, loud in your face. But it's Nick McLeod, the Giants corner, who just continues to make play after play. I saw a nice pass deflection he made on a deep ball today. This dude just shows up to work and does his job over and over and over again and gives me some confidence that at the very least, the Giants can maybe have two corners I can rely on this year.
Yeah, Andrew Phillips also mentioned Nick McLeod with he was good he was good on the field yesterday with his run fits. Had a couple of TFLs. I think he had 2. But he mentioned how Nick McLeod was helping him, with playing nickel, and he's learning a lot from Nick McLeod. And my first time at practice, I saw Nick McLeod off to the side helping Isaiah Simmons with jam and press. I don't know where he's going to end up. I think in an ideal world, because I really do believe in his skill set for what he is right now, a player who, hey, if I went to anybody else who was a fan of another team, like a diehard fan of another team, diehard fan of the NFL, and I said, hey, Nick McLeod, he's a pretty good player, they'd be like, who are you talking about? So that's the type of player we're talking about. But Giant fans know who Nick McLeod is. And I believe he's a very smart and a very tough player, very chippy player. He got into it with Wan'Dale Robinson a couple practices back. Yesterday's practice on Monday, he got into it with Tyrone Tracy. I believe he got into it with Tyrone Tracy also in a previous practice. So this guy plays with some edge, and I appreciate that in a cornerback. But I think in an ideal world, Dan, he gets that starting spot opposite of Deonte Banks if the Giants don't sign a cornerback, which I kind of want the Giants to sign another outside cornerback.
Yeah.
Because if it's not Cordell Flott, who has kind of had a rough camp so far, I think he had to play today, but before today, he had a pretty damn rough camp, right? Who the hell is it going to be? And we're talking about Nick McLeod in the slot, and it's like, okay, we could do that, but we also have Andrew Phillips, who I think can be an asset. We're entertaining Isaiah Simmons, right? We're talking about Darnay Holmes out on the outside. I'm not too confident about that with the second team. So I'm hoping Nick McLeod can become a full-time starting player here. But if not, he should be out there in certain sub-package roles, and he can handle a lot of different responsibilities because he's smart, tough, and dependable.
Yeah, I'm with you on all that. And I think he's nice. A nice, maybe the word is insurance policy for the Giants this year. I think that's probably a good way to look at it, that they may have not previously felt like they had a corner, but we have to make sure that the coaching staff feels the same way. But I do think it's a good early sign that he's getting all these reps.
Yes. There are a couple other defensive backs who have been playing well. Dane Belton has been a player who he got beat a couple of times in yesterday's practice, but beat is a word that, is ambiguous the way I'm using it, because he was in tight coverage. It's just Jones threw it well. And then the receiver, it was Jalen Hyatt, is the one play that I'm referencing, made a nice, tough contested catch. And it's great to see Dane Belton moving around out there and seizing the opportunity of first team snaps, because Tyler Nubin is off with his calf injury. Hopefully he can come back soon, because I really want to see Tyler Nubin out there, because I think he could be a really good player for this defense. And then there's also Javarius Owens, who is earning second team snaps because Dane Belton is not there. And this is the second practice in a row where Javarius Owens has recorded an interception. He got, I think, Drew Lock maybe twice, maybe it was Tommy DeVito the last time. So Javarius Owens is putting himself in the right place at the right time. And he was one of the more impressive players in special teams drills. And I know special teams drills, they're not sexy, but it does show a level of competency, competitiveness, and also a path to the roster for these players who otherwise would probably be cut because they might not be considered as defensive players primarily. They're more special teams assets. And in yesterday's practice, I marked this down on the Big Blue View practice report from yesterday. They were doing gunner drills where there was a bag about 15 yards down the field. The gunner would go and then somebody would try to block them. And it seemed like to me that every time the gunner won, it was just how much did they win by. Basically, it was just slow that guy down.
Yeah.
Every time it was Javarius Owens, though, as the gunner, it was like a clean win. And I marked down all the clean wins that I saw.
Sure.
A couple more notes from that drill and just practice in general from yesterday, if I may.
Yes, let's do it.
I just wanted to bring this one guy up because the tight end position is so interesting to me. First off, Theo Johnson, gigantic human being. Like, that dude is huge, right? Secondly, Jack Stoll had a rough practice on Monday. Jack Stoll, I think, dropped 2 passes. One might have been in 7-on-7. The other one was in team period, third team. He's not earning any first team reps. All the other tight ends are earning first team reps other than Tyree Jackson and Jack Stoll, who got to camp a little bit late because he was also coming back from an injury. And he was really bad on the special teams drill, that one special team drill that I was referring to before. So not positive for him when you look at a very crowded tight end room where all of them are earning first team reps except for you and Tyree Jackson, who I would say a lot of people didn't pick to make this team.
Yeah, definitely something to keep an eye on. We talked about it maybe a couple of days ago. This tight end depth chart, someone's going to get cut. It's just a matter of who, because it's a numbers game. Anything else from practice that we missed?
I marked it all down on the Big Blue View article. If anybody wants to go check it out, go to bigblueview.com. There were a lot of zone stretch runs, some zone reads. I haven't seen as many power gap type runs. It's been more zone and just kind of getting the offensive line to step together, move as a unit, synchronized, and then execute their blocks, climb up to the second level. But hitting just started here in practice, so you got to take all this with a little bit of a grain of salt, right? I'm sure the Giants will still incorporate much more physical power gap concepts. But Devin Singletary, he's played in both systems, but I would say he's probably a little bit more of a zone runner. He had a lot of success last year with Bobby Slowick and the Texans running zone. So if the offensive line can get all on the same page, that would be awesome for zone blocking. And Turbo Miller popped off again yesterday with like it could have been like a 40-yard touchdown run. He made someone miss and went up the far sideline. So it was a little bit tough to see from where I was, but went up the far sideline, and then everyone was kind of like cheering and celebrating. And it just gets you to think, man, like, he might have a shot, especially if Eric Gray, if Eric Gray cannot differentiate himself from Devin Singletary enough, if he can't pass block and you're just basically like a slower version of Devin Singletary, and then you have this lightning rod that you might not want to slip through, waiver system, it could come down to that. Like, preseason is going to be very important for Eric Gray, and he's got to prove that he can be a little bit different than Devin Singletary. I think he's a physical runner. He seems to finish his runs. He runs low behind his pads, but so does Devin Singletary. And he's a little bit more physical than Devin Singletary. But Giants want explosiveness. They want explosive weapons. And I think Turbo, he's that guy in preseason who's going to go off for a 50-yard touchdown run, and everyone's going to be like, yo, and it's going to put the Giants in this awkward position where they're like, yo, are we going to cut our 5th round pick from last year? It could be that. I don't know if it is that right now, but it could be.
Could easily be that. And I talked about this today on Dynasty Podcast at Fantasy Football Today with Heath about Turbo Miller and about just how open this Giant step chart seems to be after running back 1 with Devin Singletary. Well, 1, we already know it's not going to be a snap share percentage like Saquon Barkley got with Devin Singletary. This ain't going to be that. Devin Singletary is not going to morph into a workhorse. They're going to use a multi-back system. After Singletary, there are a lot of touches to be had. And I've heard, but I'm curious if you've seen any of it, that Tyrone Tracy has also looked pretty good so far. Any thoughts on Tracy? Did you get a chance to watch him at all?
Yeah, I've seen Tracy move around, and he's what you expect him to be. I haven't seen him make a huge dynamic play. Sure. I feel like Miller's the guy making that, but Miller's also the guy going against third and second team. True. Whereas Tracy is mixing in with the first team a little bit. Singletary had a sick run yesterday as well, found a cutback lane, just jumped through it, and then a lot of people also was like, oh, the crowd went wild. So I think Singletary is going to be a good player, but I don't think he's going to be that full-time back. He's not really built like that. He's 5'7". He's a pretty small guy, but he's thickly built. Yeah, it's interesting, man. We always focus on this tight end room, Dan. That running back room could be fun too if Miller comes out that first preseason game and does some stuff.
Without a doubt. It'll be very interesting to see. All right. That's all we have today on the Big Blue Banter podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. We will be doing another Hard Knocks episode. Potentially tonight, but if not tomorrow. But so keep an eye out for that, and then more training camp coverage. Nick is going to be back at camp on Thursday, so we'll definitely have a good report coming from there. Thanks so much for tuning in. Please if you watch this, hit the like button, please, not just view it, like it, download on iTunes and all of those good things. So thank you so much. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll talk to you soon.